Greetings, traveler. I'm SnapJelly, and the quest for good HEMA gloves essentially never ends. There are no perfect HEMA gloves out there. Gloves are either they are like restricting in mobility, or they are not really protective enough. And that's a struggle that if you do practice HEMA, that you recognize, or if you want to practice HEMA, you are gonna encounter in the future. Now, because of that, many people say, well, why don't you just wear gauntlets? Because, well, in history, people used gauntlets to protect against sword strikes, so why wouldn't you use gauntlets now for the exact same thing? And that is because, well, back in history, hand protection that they used didn't actually have the same requirements as today. It did change. It might sound like, oh, back then they had that to protect their hands against swords, and so now use the same thing, but that equipment that they had back then is not made, designed, or prepared for HEMA today, for what HEMA is today. And just think about the fact that a lot of equipment, both, weapons, armor, and whatever, that was made for war, was never actually used. Most soldiers never engaged in battles, and all of their equipment that they had was, because of that, never used. Now, compare that to HEMA people now, right? They join a school, they fight once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, and their equipment is beaten to shit every single time. Getting hit on the hands is not very uncommon. Like, broken fingers is the most common injury in HEMA. So, that gauntlet that you would use for HEMA today has to withstand a lot more abuse than gauntlets would have had back in the day. Because if you would have gauntlets, then I'm assuming that you would have a full suit of armor, you'd be quite a wealthy person, but regardless of that, you would be a soldier, right? The chances of you actually engaging in battle aren't that big, and even if you would engage in battle, it still changes, because now we willfully go to a HEMA school to practice, to hit each other. And back then, the equipment that you went to war with was not the same equipment that you used for actual war, right? You didn't train with your war sword. You had a specific training equipment. It wasn't the stuff that you fought with on the actual battlefield. So your gauntlets would have never been used before or hit before, and they would essentially have to withstand one battle before you would send them off to be repaired or get new ones. But now, your gauntlets or gloves or whatever have to withstand hours of beating once or multiple times a week. That's kind of a difference there. And another thing how it changed is that, back then, the primary purpose of a gauntlet was to protect against cuts, right? Because swords are sharp, and, well, you didn't want your fingers to fly off, so the gauntlet had to protect against sword cuts. And it did that. But now, you don't practice with sharp swords. Well, I hope you don't, at least. Now, so that is not a thing anymore. What a gauntlet or glove has to do now is protect against anything, essentially. You want to prevent any damage from happening, if possible. You see, if you would go to war, and you would, actually engage in combat, and you would fight a person, get a few blows, and you would survive the battle and the war, presumably, and you would get out of that war with no injuries except for a broken finger, then that's a good day, that's worth celebrating. But if you go to HEMA practice just for hobby, and you come back from HEMA practice with a broken finger, that sucks major ass. See, that's kind of the thing. That broken finger is gonna bother you a lot. Now, if that broken finger weighs up against dying otherwise, that broken finger all of a sudden is not that big of a deal anymore. But if you go to HEMA just for funsies and you break a finger, and you're like, you're a construction worker, or a painter, or a fucking writer, or whatever you are, you're gonna need that finger. That is gonna bother you a lot because, well, it's just a hobby. So because of that, people require better gloves or gauntlets. And gauntlets, reproductions of medieval gauntlets, they don't really, hold up to the standard that a lot of modern protective equipment has. Because there is a lot of very good protective equipment out there. So because of that, your reproduction of a gauntlet would have to be a lot thicker. Because, well, another thing is, like, if you would go to war and engage in battle and your armor is fucked up but you live, then that's a good day, right? But if you go to HEMA practice and all of your equipment is just kind of fucked up after one sparring match or one bout or whatever you would call it, then I would demand my money back. I don't want my gloves or gauntlets to be fucking busted to shit after one fight. But if that weighs up to your life, it's not that big of a deal anymore. So your gauntlets would have to be a lot thicker than they were historically, and they're also metal, so that increases the weight. And well, they're not really heavy. It's not like lifting dumbbells or anything like that, but it's a bit of extra weight that's unnecessary. A lot of modern HEMA gloves are just as protective, but, you know, lighter, so it's a bit of extra weight that's unnecessary. And yeah, it's just not constructed for what HEMA is today. If you do want to use gauntlets, then I recommend that you get mitten gauntlets rather than gauntlets with individual fingers. And because they were not used as often as gauntlets with individual fingers, but they did exist, so it's still accurate. And constructions, that's the same with modern fencing equipment. Glove constructions that have a cup rather than individual fingers, it's a strong construction. It's safer just in general. So if you want to use gauntlets, then I recommend you use that and keep your fingers safe. All of that being said though, could you use gauntlets? Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that you do because of the reasons that I just said, but you could get reproduction of a gauntlet and you could use that. It's a fair amount of protection. It's metal. It's going to keep your knuckles safe mostly. It's just if you get a blow on the fingers, that's probably going to be sore for a while. And if you get like really stuck, if you get like a very hard blow on one of your fingers, your finger might break. And that's basically the same with a lot of modern HEMA gear as well. So because, well, as I said in the beginning, the quest for good gloves never ends. Each and every glove you'll find is shit in its own way. They all suck one way or another. There is no perfect glove. But yeah, that's kind of my take on the thing. You could use gauntlets. I would not recommend that you use gauntlets. It looks cool if you do, but it's not as safe and not as comfy as a lot of modern HEMA gear is. So, be safe, keep your fingers safe, use gloves rather than gauntlets. I think. Anything else I wanted to say? I think you got the point. Whoopsie-doodles, I did forget something. A small side note, really, it's kind of the thing that there is a lot of variation as well between quality in reproductions. And regardless of the construction of a gauntlet, of a traditional gauntlet, not being as sturdy as a lot of modern HEMA gear is, still though, a lot of the good reproductions, good quality steel gauntlets are quite pricey as well. That's something that you have to keep in mind. HEMA equipment is pricey in general, but if you want to use gauntlets for practice, they are not going to stay pretty. They are not going to stay pretty. I can't talk for some reason. Because, you know, it's going to get hits, it's going to get scratches and blah, blah, it's going to get ugly after a while. And they are quite pricey, and I can with full certainty, I really can't talk, say that you can get a arguably better, in my opinion better, HEMA glove, modern HEMA glove, for the same price or even less if you want to have a good gauntlet. There are a lot of gauntlets out there from reproductions from all periods for basically shit money, but if you buy those, then you get a shit gauntlet that you really can't use. And so that's honestly just a waste of money. If you want something that you can use that's protected for your hands, then buying a gauntlet, in my opinion, for its defensive quality, does not weigh up to the modern HEMA gauntlets that you can get for the exact same price, or even less. Okay, that's it. So that was it for today. If you stuck around this long, you might as well subscribe. Don't forget to hit that like button, because if you do, then it turns blue. And who doesn't love blue? Blue is such a beautiful color. Click it now, and you'll find that it's blue. Oh, it's gorgeous. Click it. Click it. Good. See? It's blue. Beautiful, isn't it? And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys. What am I doing with my life?